Halo, halo, friendos. Well met, and welcome back to another episode of the Sacred Icon podcast. Previously on, Brian and I boarded the hype train, anticipating the release of Starfield on PC and Xbox, as well as Baldur's Gate 3 on the PS5. And lo and behold, we did the episode last week talking about Brian's Starfield impressions. He's just beaten it pretty much. I think you're still going to play a little bit, right? Or are you kind of
maybe
done?
I kind of started another playthrough, and then I was kind of like, I think I'm ready to set this aside. I know that'll make some people sad, but I'm like 60 some hours, beat all the main content. I feel very satisfied with it. Great game. So
well, we're gonna do an episode next week, having Brian give his review on that, going into spoiler territory. So that's gonna be fun. Look forward to that. What are you gonna play next? Actually, what are you moving on to in between?
I don't know. Halfway through the game, I was thinking I'm definitely gonna play Skyrim again because it's been so long. The itch. Yeah. But I don't know if I can handle that much Bethesda into the veins at once. So Spider-Man's it's a month away still. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to play.
Are you sitting out on Phantom Liberty?
I've considered picking that up. I've also thought this might be a really cool time to play through Final Fantasy VII Remake again because it's been well over a year since I played it. And, we just got the Rebirth hype, so that would be fun.
How much different content is there with Intergrade? New content.
It's about a 5-hour Yuffie campaign.
Okay.
But if you do some of the little side quests, and there's like a little mini game in there too, you could probably juice it for a little more hours out of it. But did you see the bundle they have going right now?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't see how much it was, but I saw them advertising.
Well, if you just pre-order Final Fantasy VII Rebirth for the full $70, they give you the full Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade package. Ooh. But then again, actually, Josh, I could be wrong, but I think because you already owned it on PS4, I think you can just get a $10 upgrade.
Okay.
But then again, if you're going to buy Rebirth anyways, it's technically cheaper to do it that route.
Well, does Sony take out the money immediately from your account when you pre-order? Because Xbox usually waits till it's about to come out, I think.
I'm trying to think if... I almost want to say Sony does take it right away. That's freaking Sony. Yeah. But because I pre-ordered Final Fantasy 16 like a month ahead of time. I think it took it right away. But,
okay.
Yeah, I mean,
it's still a cool option though. That's pretty.
It's you'll definitely want. I mean, you'll probably wait till like a month or less for the game releases, but you'll definitely want to play the Yuffie DLC. Not only because it's more content that pertains, but it does tie in with an extra. Remember, I told you it gives an extra ending to actual 7 remake.
For Zack, right? Yeah.
For Zack and for the rest of them. There's more. It shows them traveling to the next village and more conversation, more...
Wow, I spaced on that. I was just talking on the Patreon. I said, I don't know if I'm going to have time to play that. I want to, but I don't know if I will have time to play that before Rebirth.
You don't have to replay through Remake. It'll let you jump right into the Yuffie DLC. You can just
Oh, that's definitely tempting then.
That's something you could do in a day or two.
Yeah.
Like I said.
Oh, I might do that then. Because I'd like to have it beat before Rebirth.
Yeah, and also I feel like they refined the gameplay even for the Yuffie stuff. Like the Yuffie DLC was like showing what they were going to do with Rebirth. Like it looks like in Rebirth you're going to have, you can see from the trailers, it looks like you're going to have like moves where like two characters come together to do special moves and stuff. Like, and there was kind of that in the Yuffie DLC a bit. Her control and her like synergy with her companion in that game in the Yuffie DLC was like an upgrade even from Remake. So I found it really good. I mean, I guess I don't know. They never sold it as an individual package. Because I was about to say like it's definitely worth the money, but I don't know what they would have charged. I don't know what they would have charged for the Yuffie DLC if it was alone. I think it's worth $20 or less.
I thought it was 20. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that seems right. I mean,
I might have that upgrade I'm eligible for. I just haven't really looked into it. But that's pretty cool though, man. Were you probably got super hyped though when you saw the trailer, right? For Rebirth.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because I had that awful day, which for those in the Discord they already know, but I dropped my phone on a road and didn't realize I dropped it till 2 minutes later, and when I ran back it had been ran over by a car already. So I had this awful day, was trying to get my pictures off my phone, get a new phone. I missed the Nintendo thing, I missed the PlayStation thing. Well, then I come home and I'm like, finally at the end of the day, everything's done, wrapped up. I'm like, I'm gonna see if I can catch any of the PlayStation showcase. And I turn the TV on, and it's the lady saying, "We have one more thing from Square Enix," and I just get to see Rebirth. Yeah, like that's it. Like
great timing, bro.
Timed. Yeah, and that's the thing that's the thing that mattered the most. If I had got there any earlier, I would have seen Foam Stars, and that would have been a travesty. So,
Yeah, not the most fun. But yeah, guys, Brian has not played any of Baldur's Gate 3. He's been focused on Starfield, but he's going to help me out here. He's going to join with me and celebrate me having played Baldur's Gate 3. I played about 30 hours now when I've been able to. That's the hardest part about this game. And I know you guys playing Starfield is probably had the same experience, even if you've got more time with it. Just not enough hours to get in with it. Not enough time in sessions. I mean, this is the first time in a long time where I'm really like realizing how much or little time I'm playing in my sessions. Like there's times when I just have like 2 hours, and because it's an RPG, I get so little done in that
Just
time.
like one combat encounter.
Yeah, sometimes it is, but they can be pretty awesome. But before I go into a lot of the content itself, guys, I do want to talk a little bit about some story stuff, non-spoiler, of course, but gameplay and whatnot, and just some cons I have for it and final thoughts. I wanted to actually go back about a month in time for you guys that don't know, and kind of talk about some drama that was going on within the industry about this game, and pick Brian's brain about this because we haven't really talked about this a lot. But to start things off, on Metacritic, both on the PS5 and PC, this game currently sits at 96 with its Metascore. On Steam, the game has an all-time peak of 875,343. And for comparison, although I'm not saying it for competing senses, but just to give you an idea, Starfield, all-time peak, 330,597. A top 10 of all time, Baldur's Gate 3 is in 6th place. Or 7th place, I'm sorry, with that number. So it's hugely successful. It's got I have to read these reviews real quick because this game took off like a bat out of hell, coming out of nowhere. I don't think anyone expected this game to be this good. Someone says, you know that time when you're playing D&D and you think, man, it would be so cool if this was a game, but it would be too intricate and extremely difficult and tasking to create, so it's probably not a reasonable thing to wish for? Well, this is that game. Another person said, to sum this up in a way that only other players will understand, this game has a unique ability to make you think about your next playthrough while you're still playing your current one. Totally happening to me. The last one, my favorite. This is way cheaper than a heroin addiction. 10 out of 10. So this game obviously has taken off. Now, what's interesting about this is this person, I'm not, there's too many names, so I'm not going to go through all the names specifically, but a lot of people within the industry came out and wanted to kind of advise gamers to not get to not have too high expectations for other games to follow this trend. One person in the industry said that kicked this all off. Like a lot of people, I'm deeply excited about what the lovely folks at Larian accomplished with Baldur's Gate 3, but I want to gently, preemptively push back against players taking that excitement and using it to apply criticism or a raised standard to RPGs going forward. Another person said, you're absolutely right. Even if you look at one of Swen's touchstones, Swen being I think that's his name, the CEO of Larian. I want to look at one of his touchdowns, Ultima 7. That's a game that had 12 years of prior games feeding into it. If we were to look at this as a new benchmark, we would need to then focus on creating conditions, just like with Tears of the Kingdom. Another person said to that, great thread. The conditions under which BG3 were made are atypical. This is in no way a slight against the game or the people working on it who are clearly passionate and talented. Having the foundation set and the funding to build things on your own term is invaluable. Another person said, please, please, please put some thought into this before you proclaim this as what AAA should be moving forward. 6 years and 400 plus people with insane funding due to the IP have given BG3 a big boost. It's truly unrealistic to expect this on a regular basis. And an employee from Larian tweeted back, what funding? Next up, this is pretty interesting. Developers aren't panicking about, quote, new expectations. Everything I've seen has been related to questioning the sustainability of making titles this large. BG3 was in development for 6 years, involved a team of 400 plus, and had funding from one of the largest IPs out there. Another person saying that. Same guy replied, small detail. I believe it's publicly known that Wizards of the Coast, who owns Dungeons & Dragons, didn't fund BG3. We paid for the privilege of creating the game with this IP. Excuse me. Asked about the details, Swen, and I may be mispronouncing his name, guys. agreed that Baldur's Gate 3 could only have come about under certain circumstances. He was quoted as saying, obviously, yeah, if you're a 50-man studio or 10-man studio, you shouldn't try to make a game like Baldur's Gate 3, he said. But he questioned the reality of the, quote, standards being argued over. I'm losing my voice, apparently. The problem I have is with the use of the word standards, he said. This is video games. Standards just die every day. Things get reinvented. New things appear all the time. When I was starting out in the industry, Assassin's Creed set the new standard. It was over. Nobody could make games like Assassin's Creed. There was too much budget behind it. That was going to be the future. Everybody had to consolidate, blah, blah, blah. That didn't materialize. In video games, there's so much more free space to explore, still in the creative tree. So we also had someone else that kind of pushed back on this, and that's where I wanted to kind of get Brian's thoughts after this. She said, oh boy, here comes my usual take. I can't disagree with this one more. Whenever a game disrupts the industry and delights players beyond expectations, it absolutely raises the industry and genre standards regardless of the why and how. She finished by saying, we should look at the Larian success story and ask ourselves, how are we going to make our games better and create the next games that shake up the industry? Players should and must always expect more from us, never less. So that's pretty interesting to me, the fact that this came about, and I only learned about this recently. What do you think about all that, Brian?
I do, not to sound like your average gamer TM, but I do think it's, for the most part, bullshit. The things I'll preface that with are, I'm not a publisher, I'm not a developer, I don't know the industry the way that people actually who work in it do, so we can't pretend like we know everything. There's stuff we don't know.
Right.
And then the other thing I'll say is, there's only one angle that I can see this being a fair statement, and that's that publishers and the people supporting the video games that are being made, they don't want to support AAA budget, tactical, isometric, turn-based RPGs for 6 years with no return or microtransactions built in. So I think when people in the industry are saying don't expect this going forward, it's too high of a standard, I think that's true if what they mean is publishers are not going to allow us to do this, because that's probably true. I mean, you just don't see these kind of games being made, and publishers are always looking to get the maximum amount of money out of the least amount of work. And Baldur's Gate 3 looks like a ton of work for 6 years, with there's no microtransactions built in. There's no way to like buy skins for your characters or something like that. So
pretty cool.
And that's the thing is, like, despite how well this game's doing, the sad truth is it's probably not going to make anywhere near as much money as a game that did sell microtransactions and stuff like that. But they were uncompromised in their vision. So I think, but putting that aside, there's no reason why we can't expect games to be at this quality. And let me say, before I go forward with that too, what do we mean when we say games this quality? Like Baldur's Gate 3, there's other games that already exist that are of similar quality to Baldur's Gate 3. It's not like we're saying Baldur's Gate 3 is the only game in the world to achieve this. I would say something like Grand Theft Auto 5 or Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm not saying they're the same score or whatever, but the level of quality in those kind of games is similar to Baldur's Gate.
Right.
Or maybe like an Elden Ring or you know, just I could go on and list games like that. So there's games that are of the quality of Baldur's Gate 3 already. I understand that it's not a one-to-one comparison. Like Red Dead Redemption 2 to Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't have like all the different outcomes or something like that, but they're different games. So we already have games that are of the quality of Baldur's Gate 3. This isn't, in a sense, this isn't anything new. This is new for like, wow, look at this CRPG.
I think the genre itself, it's an evolution or next step.
But yeah, we do get games that are this quality already. I don't want to pretend like this is the only one. But then when they talk about, you know, like 6 years of development, I don't even know why they bring that up. Most games are getting that now anyways, it seems. 5-6 years or longer.
I'm pretty sure Matt Booty or someone at Microsoft even said like the days of, or the era of like the 3-year development cycle games is kind of over. So
yeah, I don't really think 6 years is much. I mean, gamers, you know, can be very impatient, but like I think gamers are fine with if games can be the quality of Baldur's Gate 3, I think they're fine waiting 6 years. We pretty much are anyways. Waited 6 years for Halo Infinite, waited 8 years for Starfield. I mean, and that's another thing too is like, and I know some of the people in the Discord, they're gonna be like, they're gonna hate when I say this, but I'm like, Starfield had 8 years Baldur's Gate 3 had 6. Baldur's Gate's a way better game. I can just tell that already.
Man, you just putting a target on your back right now,
like,
Brian.
I know, but like, and I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, but like, Starfield is just more Bethesda, and it took 8 years.
Is that a little sizzle for next week's episode?
It is, and I loved Starfield, but like, and also another thing you brought up, Josh, is like, oh, well, this game was only possible because they iterated on this game for years by, like, for instance, like Divinity Original Sin and Original Sin 2. They carried their learnings and development. There's no way Baldur's Gate 3 could have been made from scratch in 6 years. There's no way. It's not that probably is not possible. But I still don't know what the point of this was, because almost every studio I can think of does iterate on their prior games. Bethesda's been iterating on the same engine for 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. They should be able to deliver more than they are now. You look at Bungie with, I think Destiny even was built off of the Blam code from Halo. I mean, all of these games.
Okay, interesting.
BioWare, I know, like, they had to switch to Frostbite engine, but a lot of their games for a while were built upon the same. Like, most companies with franchise, like, they build on their technology. So I still, none of these things are really convincing me of why we couldn't expect this kind of type of quality. Games are taking 6 years already. People are iterating on their prior technology in games already. What is the issue here? I think what the issue is that, like I said, publishers don't want to invest 6 years. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 had to be freaking expensive to make. I can't imagine. And like, let's say, I'm making the numbers up here. Let's say Baldur's Gate 3 took $400 million to develop, and it's going to make $1.5 billion. That was a profit, but like, that probably wasn't. I mean, think about if you make something like Genshin Impact or something that costs like nowhere near as much and then makes tens of billions. I mean, it's like, why stress over a game for 6 years with no microtransactions or way to pick up revenue if your goal is profits? And I think that's the thing, is like, obviously one of the goals of Baldur's Gate 3 was profits, because like the studio's not going to survive or pay the families to continue if they don't. But like, Baldur's Gate 3 pretty clearly seems like a game developed out of passion for people who wanted to make a particular type of game uncompromising. So
for sure,
I think it's, the only thing I'll say is I think it might be unrealistic to expect Baldur's Gate 3 type of quality in AAA gaming consistently when you have publishers that don't want that. Publishers do not want that type of game. But with the amount of money that's being spent on these games and the amount of time that they're being developed, I don't think it's crazy to ask for that much at all. And I also don't know why, I'm reiterating what I already said, but I don't know why people didn't bring up my first point, which was we have other games that are the quality of Baldur's Gate 3. Like, I'm not trying to take anything away from Baldur's Gate 3, but like, why are people pretending like this is the only game on the planet to be this quality? It might be the only CRPG with this much development behind it, but like, there's a lot of games that are as good as Baldur's Gate 3. I would say they're rare. I would say just this year, I mean, I don't know if there's anything that's really going to be on Baldur's Gate 3's level, but that's kind of what I have. I mean, I probably could say more, but I'll pass it back to you, Josh.
Well, you make a lot of great points. That's why Brian's the best. I pass it over to him, and look, he just slam dunks that shit with a ton of info. It's pretty interesting to me, too, because when it comes to the budget aspect, I have no idea how much that game cost to make, but we know for a fact that with the Divinity games, they had to get that stuff on Kickstarter just to get going. Mm-hmm. So they used the funding, like whatever they made off of the Divinity games, to fund this game, which is insane to comprehend. I mean, I have heard amazing things about Original Sin 2, but it's hard to imagine the way Baldur's Gate 3 has turned out just having that budget. But we don't know, I don't know. And for you guys interested, though, if you want to get more info on this stuff, a lot of this information I got from Maddie Plays on YouTube. Also, Dustin Legary of IGN put out a great video talking about this, and that's where a lot of the hubbub was kind of stemming from. But pretty interesting. Just feels weird. I mean, I can see why, and I'm going to go into some of those points of why I think this is unique and interesting in its own way. But at the same time, it just seems silly to talk about that. I look at something like Witcher 3, which when that came out, everyone was like, oh, the quest, all the side quests, all those types of quests are on the same level of quality as the main quest, it feels like. And then you'd see other games come out. And I think it was BioWare commenting on Andromeda at one point and saying they took inspiration from Witcher 3 for their side quests.
Yeah.
Like, as much as I love
failed. You failed. Angry Joe.
I enjoy Andromeda. Yeah. But
no,
you saw that. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I'm sorry, Josh. I
was just going to say, I saw them. After Witcher 3 came out, I thought maybe side quests will really take a step up in quality. And I feel like Witcher 3 is still one of a kind. And I think Baldur's Gate 3 is the first game that I've played since Witcher 3 where it feels like the side quests are on the same level. And I'm going to go into that more. But that never really became a trend that took off,
Yeah.
And people didn't have the expectations much then because I feel like Witcher 3 was sort of lightning in a bottle at the time. But now you're seeing this with another RPG that's a different kind. But people are saying that, pushing back and not wanting people to expect that. I almost wonder if that's down to just microtransactions. Like our games have to have some element of like currency that's constantly reoccurring. Yeah, perfectly said. So I don't know if it's that, but still silly to talk about. Like, let people be happy. Let this game be successful. Even if you don't like it, it's something you should celebrate.
I think we see history repeating itself because, like, it's funny because I'm not even trying to bring up Bethesda, but, like, when Skyrim came out, that was a game that you never would have expected 60 million copies to sell. Skyrim was just doing things better in 2011 than its contemporaries, right? And then Witcher 3 comes along, and it kind of looks at, people who worked on Witcher 3 cite Skyrim for inspiration. Witcher 3 comes along and they kind of up the ante again, right? Like, I'm not saying Witcher 3 is objectively better than Skyrim, but it's writing and it's
Joe would say that.
Like, yeah, I would say it's writing and quests are a step up, right? And then
right.
What have we really seen for RPGs since Witcher 3 that has upped the ante? I would say we haven't seen anything until Baldur's Gate 3.
No.
You can take that for any genre. I think when GoldenEye came out on N64, it was like, oh, this is a fun multiplayer game on a console. Well, then you get Halo, and Halo pretty much makes GoldenEye. I know some people would be mad about this, but like, why would you play GoldenEye after Halo, right? Like, Halo's so much more better, well built. I'm not saying you can't prefer GoldenEye, but you know what I mean. Then you play Halo, and Halo's kind of top dog. Well, then Halo doesn't innovate, and then Call of Duty kind of takes over. You know what I mean? Like this, we just continue to see this, and I'm sure there's a decent chance. Because remember when Witcher 3 came out, CD Projekt Red felt like an angel sent down from above. Felt like they could do no wrong.
Oh, yeah.
But now that's what Larian feels like.
Yeah,
like
Larian's the new CD Projekt.
Yeah, now CD Projekt, they're the guys who gave us a good game and then screwed us over on Cyberpunk, but fixed it, and we're starting to mend the relationship. Larian's got that. They look like the angel from above. So now just picture, in 10 years, could we be talking about a new game from Larian that dropped the ball and we're like, oh, we thought these were the Baldur's Gate 3 guys, but they're kind of... history repeats itself.
Matty talked about this too, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he said, basically when you're a smaller studio, you kind of have everything to gain and nothing to lose. But then when you become a bigger studio, as more success comes your way, that's when your leash is shortened by corporate, the people, the overheads and stuff like that. And you're kind of limited in what you can do and the chances you want to take. And then you have to start enforcing stuff like that. And so that's always possible. I think that is what it would probably, I don't know specifically if it's true, but I feel like that's probably what happened with CD Projekt going from Witcher to
remember all
Cyberpunk.
the stuff that came out from Jason Schreier about CD Projekt Red? The whole mentality in the studio was, we're the people who made Witcher 3. We did that, so we can do anything. And then like the higher ups were pushing crunch and like getting the game out early. We're like, we made Witcher 3. Like, just will this into existence because we're the Witcher 3 people. And I can see how that would happen, right? Like, think if you were somebody who majorly contributed to the development of Witcher 3, it would be hard not to have some hubris to think like, wow, I can probably do anything. Like, a lot of people think I helped create the best RPG ever made. And that hubris kicked him in the butt. So, like, it's going to be hard for Larian to keep a level head and follow up now. But, yeah, I think the whole, like, get your lower your we should always higher expectations for these things. But it's funny, too, like, there's always that part of me that, you and I have talked about this several times in the podcast before, Josh, is like where I'm always the advocate of we don't need to spend more money and have more... we don't need to up the ante every time. Like, we can just have a good game. And that's where well, I was going to say that's where I can give Starfield some credibility. They didn't up the ante. They gave us more high quality Bethesda, but they didn't really push the envelope at all.
Where's the badum-tis for that?
Yeah, but that's probably a bad example because that was 8 years in development. But like, I've always, me and Josh had this disagreement years ago that Josh has kind of come around more on, where it's like, I don't think every game needs to have more budget, higher graphics, higher this, higher that. Like, we could just get a really good, like, imagine if a KOTOR 3 came out today that...
We can't even get a remake.
I know, but I
can't imagine.
Imagine if we get a KOTOR 3 that had, like, similar scope and level design as KOTOR 1, with just the same quality writing and characters and everything, but with PS4 graphics. That'd probably be pretty exciting for you still. Like if you got the same quality, like it doesn't. But
I
now
don't
if a
think much
KOTOR 3
plays
came
like
out,
that.
KOTOR 3 has to be open world. It has to have ray tracing, HDR. It has to have Troy Baker doing half the roles. Like, that's just like, we don't need that.
Miss me with that shit.
But yeah, I feel like, so much of Baldur's Gate 3, and I haven't played it, to be fair, but I have watched a lot of content on it and read a lot of reviews and all that stuff. It does seem like a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 stems from the passion that's behind it, and just they're not beholden to a major company. They're not acquired yet,
Right.
Unfortunately, I think they probably will be within the next decade. It seems impossible to not be acquired in the industry as it stands. But especially since once Baldur's Gate 3, once the sales really come down, once even the Xbox version's been out for a couple years, Baldur's Gate 3 is probably going to be at a $30 or less price consistently with sales down to 10, 15.
Well, I can't
How are
remember.
they going to bring in new money? How are they going to bring in new revenue?
Yeah, that's a good question. I
probably do
can't
DLC.
remember if it was in Maddie's video. I swore I heard him talk about it, but I'm not 100%. But I swore he said that Xbox did approach them about an acquisition, like acquiring them. And Larian said respectfully, like, no, because we wouldn't be able to make the kind of games we want to make. Pretty interesting.
That's it. That's what takes us all the way back to the beginning of what you said. Like, this is a publisher thing. This is like a money at the top type thing. And and this could really, we need to move on to the game itself. I know that, but like this could really stem into politics, and we don't want to go that route. But like, so much of the publisher's decision making with like how games continue to get revenue is paying the people at the top huge salaries. And I do think people at the top should get more. Like, believe it or not, I do believe people at the top should probably get more than the standard developer. And I know that's where people go, well, the developer's the one making the game. Yeah, but if you're the CEO or the manager or the leader of the entire company, I think it's fair that you receive a bump more than your average employee. But, if we're talking, GTA 6 needs to sell 100 million copies so that the CEOs get to take home a $500 million bonus, I don't think that's necessary. You know what I mean? Like, I think now legally it's okay, but morality for me says, why do you need, you're already a multi-millionaire already, why do you need a $500 million cut of this? So like,
right.
If let's say GTA 6 somehow it only sold 70 million copies. Like, there's actually a realistic situation where 70 million copies of GTA 6, if it didn't have online microtransactions, which it will, that might be a failure because of how big the budget is, right? Like, maybe it has to sell 100 million, but like, those guys at the top, they're still going to take their cut regardless of the failure. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like, for me, it's just like, how much higher could the expectations be if we weren't worried about the guys at the top getting the huge payout, right? Like, it's just like the whole Immortals of Avium thing right now with that studio getting laid off. It seems like that game's a pretty quality game. Like, it doesn't seem like it's bad. It's not Baldur's Gate 3, but like, it seems like it's a pretty quality game. But where was I going with this, I guess? It didn't make money. So I guess, but I'm guessing the guys at the top, EA probably still got its cut, or whoever, or the people at the head of the development studio probably still got its cut. So I don't know. I guess I kind of losing my train of thought here, but
you're good, man. Still touching on some good points.
Yeah, it just feels like the problem is not with expecting quality. I think it's because it seems like even with like something like Immortals, the quality's there, but
this game is, I think, an exception. It's what used to be in a lot of ways the standard, but it's now the exception because of where the industry's at. And I feel like whenever people talk about that, we just sound like our new version of boomers that are basically like, oh, they don't make it how they used to,
Yeah.
But at the same time, they just don't. Games are so different now, and the demands that come with them, and then of course the microtransactions. And even though people complain about that, for every 10 people that complain about that stuff, there's 10 other people that say, oh, I love the live service on Destiny. I wish there was no drop of content. Like there's no absence of it. I wish there was always new stuff coming in for that type of stuff. So
I don't believe in hobby games. Destiny, World of Warcraft.
We tried. We've tried it at least. We did.
Yeah, I don't believe in it.
It just wasn't for us as much personally. But and credit to Larian Studios too. They put this game in early access. This game is split into 3 acts, guys, and they put the entire first act into early access like well over a year ago. So people on Steam had all this time to play it, give feedback, test out new features as they slowly added stuff in. And I think that's another reason why the game turned out super well. And I'm not saying you can do that with every game or that you should, but I think that really helps go to show too that they were very consumer friendly in terms of like, we want to make a game that is going to, like, yeah, we're making this game, we're excited, we feel good about it, but we also want your input and we're going to utilize that. And look at the reception and how it turned out. I hope that this game sells well enough between PC, PS5, and Xbox that we can see more chances taken on games like this, regardless of whether the budget is indeed big or small. But time's going to tell. I don't necessarily expect that. I'm not going to expect anything. I would just hope to, after playing this, I would hope to see that Larian's next game is another Baldur's Gate or D&D game, because they've landed it so well.
I'd wager a lot of the sales for this game too come from it being a phenomenon. You know what I mean? Like, I've heard a lot of people, a not insignificant amount of people who bought the game, and they're not even upset they bought the game, but they played like Act 1 and they're like, I don't like these type of games, you know, like they're done playing it, you know, and because it's not
definitely not for everybody.
It's not the most it's not the most approachable like combat system and stuff like that, but it's just like, you know, like when Elden Ring came out or Breath of the Wild, it's one of those things where like even if you didn't want the game, you start considering. I think Josh, there was one day I think you were even like, yeah, I considered maybe buying Elden Ring, but nah, I probably won't.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Like, you had no hype, and you have no history to say why would you buy Elden Ring. But when it becomes such a cultural phenomenon and the FOMO is just catastrophic levels, you start to wonder, oh, maybe I'll pick that up. Like me, like I don't like the type of combat just from a preference standpoint that Baldur's Gate 3 has, but there's a good chance I'm going to pick it up because it's one of those games. It's one of those touchstone games, right? So I think when you create something that's so good, it can transcend even the people that are interested in it. You know, people just pick it up anyways.
I said it in the Discord a few days ago. I said this game is so monumental that it's the one-of-a-kind game that comes by every so often that even if you're not interested in the game, you kind of stop to look at it and you're just kind of like, would you look at that? Like, look at that, how that lightning in a bottle moment just happened for us in the industry. And history.
And I don't know what changed for me, but like when I was a teenager, if let's say, okay, so when Halo 3 came out, that was going to be the best game of the year to me, no matter what. Like Mass Effect came out that year, BioShock came out that year, great year, 2007. But like as a teenager,
you list two games and you're like, great year.
Well,
those are great games.
BioShock, Assassin's Creed, Mass Effect, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare,
absolutely,
Halo 3. But like for me as a teenager, Halo 3 was the best game that came out that year, right? Somebody say, "What's your game of the year?" I say Halo 3. And they'd say, well, what?
You almost broke your neck saying Halo 3.
I know, right?
You guys could.
And then they'd say, like if Josh had been like back then, we didn't know each other back then. If Josh had been like, well, what objectively is the best game of the year? I would have said Halo 3. Like, it would have just been simple to me because that's my game. I don't know what changed in me, but like, no part of me thinks that, because right now it's between Starfield and Final Fantasy 16 for my favorite game of the year. Neither of those games are the game of the year. It's I think it's Baldur's Gate 3, but it's either Baldur's Gate 3 or Tears of the Kingdom. Only reason I say Tears of the Kingdom is because I feel that game's basically perfect.
See, it's awesome that you say that, having played the game, you know, and you having not played that. But at the same time, I feel like when it comes to the awards show later this year, I feel like that's going to be the kind of situation where Starfield fans, as much as I like them, and I am one, even though I only played 4 hours, I don't feel like they'll be willing to let that happen. You know what I mean? Like, even though it's going to happen, they're not in control of it. Actually, I'm just saying, like, mentally and communicatively, when they talk to people, they're not going to be willing to let that go and let the fact that
that happens every year, right? If your game doesn't win, you feel like it's rigged or it's bullshit.
Right.
Like, I remember when Last of Us Part 2 won, we ran a Halo Twitter, so everyone, you know, the crossover for like Halo diehards and Last of Us fans are not that big, so everyone was like, oh, this is rigged, like, you know, there wasn't actually a good game. I'm like, Last of Us 2 is a really good game. It's like, so Baldur's Gate 3, if Baldur's Gate 3 wins, like, this is what I'm saying, is like, I don't quite know how to articulate what changed in me, because no matter, I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, but there's a good chance that even if I play Baldur's Gate 3 and love it, it's probably not going to be something I like as much as Starfield or Final Fantasy 16.
Sure.
But I'm still going to vote for Baldur's Gate 3 because I guess, like, for me, as a really passionate nerd who likes to think they know something about the gaming industry, you look at Baldur's Gate 3 and it excites you for what it's been able to pull off and for what it does for gaming and how it can change the things going forward. And you want to celebrate that, and you want to see more of that. So that's why I would cast my vote for Baldur's Gate 3, because, you know, I can honestly say for all three, even Tears of the King, well, I would say Final Fantasy 16 and Starfield feel kind of like more of the same. And while Zelda does feel like more of the same, I think where it gets a little leg up is like what they've done with the physics and mechanics in that game, and how it flawlessly, seamlessly works across the open world, and you can do anything. Kind of mind-blowing. It really is kind of mind-blowing. So I think Zelda has an up there, but like so much of what we're used to nowadays as gamers is, at best, what we expect is something as good as what we've had before. That's usually what we expect.
That's the base expectation.
We just want Halo Infinite to be as good as Halo 3. We just want Starfield to be as good as Skyrim. And that's already a high bar. Then you get something like Baldur's Gate 3, where it's better than that. You know, it's better than... If Baldur's Gate 3 had just been a competent follow-up to Baldur's Gate 2, I think that would have been acceptable. You know, like, because Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 were BioWare. This is a new studio. This is Larian. So it's like, if Larian can make the third one as good as the first two, people probably would have been happy. But it's way better, arguably. I mean, I'm sure there's people who are fans of the original, probably say those are better. I don't know. I'm not a Baldur's Gate fan per se. But like, Baldur's Gate 3 delivered so much more than that, you know, and I just don't think you see that happen too often with, I mean, it's kind of like when Elden Ring came out, and it was like, oh, okay, it's going to be Dark Souls open world, but there's no way they're going to be able to have the good boss battles and the crafted encounters. And then you play Elden Ring, and all of that was there. All the crafted encounters, all the boss battles, like, it was pretty much non-compromising, but open world. And so I think it deserves to be celebrated. And well, I'll pass it back over to you, Josh, and maybe we can go into the actual game itself. I'm glad we had this discussion here, because it kind of mirrors our Starfield discussion. Because if you remember, the first half of the podcast was about the reviews and the score controversies for that game. So we kind of have a controversy for each game.
I was cooking. I was taking notes.
Yeah.
So. I thought that was going to make a pretty interesting opening discussion, because, I feel the same way. I mean, I like, even if someone doesn't like this game or isn't interested in it, I still feel like you have to kind of respect what it's achieving with people, and just the sort of range it's got in a lot of its choices and agency it's giving you. And again, I'm going to get into that in a bit, but the fact that that's not something that has been done as well prior, just gives me hope. It gives me hope in a world industry filled with microtransactions and constant like layoffs, or this is getting acquired by this group and all this stuff. It's nice to just see a game come out that can be a landmark achievement, in the industry, whether you like it or not. And, thankfully I love it. This game, I've said before, I was deeply excited for after getting into Dungeons & Dragons, but I turned my blinders on because I knew it wasn't going to come out for a while. When they show that initial CG trailer for a game, it's going to be years before you actually get to play that game, at this point. That's what I'm realizing at the time. So I went in the dark. It went into early access, and I only used my laptop. So I knew I was not going to be able to get my hands on that. And I thought, well, I don't really want to play a chunk of the game, a good portion of it, and then upon release kind of have to replay that and only have like 2/3 of it be fresh and new to me. So I was happy for other people to do that work for me, get their enjoyment, and then I would just play it. And I would pray and hope it came to consoles, and then I'd be able to play it. And case in point, I am. Now, when this came out in early access, I had a bit of anxiety the first night, because I was reading online while I was at work that people were having issues signing into their Larian accounts, which I think, I could be wrong, but I think you need to do in order to play co-op, because it's just utilizing online features. Also, there was a big issue with HDR, big issue with, if you're using an audio headset, the audio would just pop out and it would be gone. And you'd have to like either reload, reboot the game up, something to that effect. I experienced a couple of those issues the first day when I was trying to play it, but thankfully within, I think it was 3-day early access, they got that patched and fixed right around the time of launch. So it actually shipped well, and I was seeing people talk about how well this game launched, feature complete and everything like that. And I thought, well, like they didn't experience that, but it was only for like a day or two. It really, really wasn't that bad. But it didn't derail me, but it did give me anxiety, because I thought I'm the guy that like gets fucked in the ass when it comes to getting hyped for video games. Whenever I get excited, something usually kind of backfires, like Cyberpunk did, and it just doesn't land as well. Halo Infinite I was pumped for, and they did a staggered release. And I know most people would say like, well, Josh, that's kind of the exception because the game actually what it is, the multiplayer, the campaign, it landed well. But for me, it was like, well, Halo's never done that before. It's never done a staggered release. And by the time, the actual campaign came out, people were already kind of burnt out and they exhausted themselves on the season 1 content of Halo Infinite. Brian, you got something to say?
Josh's luck, they'll re-announce KOTOR remake, and they'll say that the developer backing it are the people that did like Ty the Tasmanian Tiger for the game.
The Tasmanian Tiger. Really?
Yeah. They'll be like,
maybe
like the developers behind Ty the Tasmanian Tiger will be taking over KOTOR, and then Josh he'll have this deadpan look on his face, like, why is it always me who gets screwed? Like, why?
Here's what's interesting about that. At this point, because I'm able to play Baldur's Gate and have the experience I'm having with this game, if the KOTOR remake never happens at this point, I think I'm okay. I told Brian this on the last podcast off the air, and I think I mentioned this in the Discord. This is the only game that I've ever played that has the potential to take away the number 1 spot of my favorite game of all time. I don't think it's going to do it at all because KOTOR's got so much nostalgia attached. It's also a Star Wars game, but this is the only game that I've ever really been able to already flirt around with that idea.
What's your number 2? Is it likely to pass that?
Oblivion. It's possible. Genuinely possible.
Oblivion's got a ton of where are you feeling at this point in time? Where are you feeling most confident it could slot? Like
3.
3?
Yeah.
What's 3? Would you know what your 3 is off the top of your head now?
I think it's Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue.
Oh, okay. Big hurdle there. Big hurdle.
I mean, I really love that game, bro.
Hey, I understand attachment, emotional
We got to save Woody, bro.
Yeah, gotta save him.
Gotta save him. He's not at Al's Toy Barn. He's at the airport, bro.
Josh, I mean,
all the way to work on a Saturday.
All the way to work. Shout out to Prey. I could just go ahead and ask you some questions about Baldur's Gate 3 unless you had something prepared already.
No. I mean, I got a lot of notes and stuff, but I mean, you go ahead, fire some away if you got.
Okay, well, what is if you had to single out one aspect of just very singular one aspect of Baldur's Gate 3 that you enjoy the most? What is it? Is it the combat, the music? Is it the dialogue? Is it the mocap? Is it the setting? Is it the dice rolls? Like, what's the first on the list of things you love about this game? What's the top of the top?
I'm going to answer this, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit so I can
I
can preface before I get into that. So my favorite thing about it, and again, I'm going to backtrack with this, is the choice paralysis that it gives me. That's a new term for me. I'm testing it out, but it is something I've never really had before on this level. And that started with me for me in character creation. I made a character and I went through the opening of the game, and then I thought, let me just go back. Let me go back a little bit. And I'm gonna make another character, see what they look like. And then I went through and I replayed that intro again. I did this like 6 more times, and every time I kept trying to figure out, the character I wanted to stick with, and I couldn't. There's so many classes, and then there's all these different races, but then sub races within those, and then some face designs are sort of locked between each certain races and stuff, and they have all these hair options. The thing that's most interesting is they don't have sliders for your face. So for someone like you, Brian, I think this will be a very accessible character creation because you're not going to have to worry about like for me, I wanted a character who's got a bit bigger of a face, a little bit wider, like cheekbones and stuff, a jaw, to more accurately represent me, but it didn't have that. So you don't really have to think about that stuff as much, but they still do have a lot of options. And they also have, they got your pronoun options. They have, a couple different, like for male and female, they have 2 different builds. So like, regardless of the race you want to play, you have the option to be like a more like normal sized dude, or then a more beefier, beefcake type of dude. And same for the girl. And, just like Cyberpunk, you can choose your genitalia and stuff like that. And as I was going through it with a guy, I forgot I didn't like select the pronoun or anything. So as I kind of got to the end and I'm going through that, and the last choice you have for the creation is the genitalia, I just looked down there and my character has a vagina, and I was like, ooh, what? Vulva? Vulva? I was like, interesting, and I swapped it around and everything like that. And I don't know if that's going to come into the game, because in Cyberpunk it never really did. But case in point, like, it's got a lot of options in there, and it was really, really fun. But it took me forever to decide on a character. I would make a character, and then I would think, but I don't like his build. He's too beefy looking, or I should have added a scar here. And I just kept going back, and I thought, phew. So 5 hours
And this is
of
just
the
the
game,
character creation.
yeah, the 5 hours of the game were me just trying to decide on a character and a class and just flirting around with that. I ended up with the dude. He's a Seldarine Drow. He's got like blue, kind of darkish pale skin, white hair, because that's usually what his species has. He's a bard, so he's more of an entertainer. In combat, he does a lot of buffing and debuffing, trying to help teammates, trying to weaken opponents. And I named him Starkiss. He's got some face paint on his face, so I took a little inspiration from, a little bit of D&D stuff, but also Captain Planet. Kiss the band.
It does look like a Captain Planet.
Yeah. And then so one of my buddies hit me up on Instagram and said Dazzler from X-Men. And I was like, I went and Googled Dazzler because I forgot what she looked like. And I was like, oh my God, you're right.
Close.
Totally looks like Dazzler. But yeah. Going into the story stuff, though, again, to kind of get into that, it's just the opportunity of choice and the way they give you freedom with that, the agency they give you with that. No two playthroughs will truly ever be the same. And you've heard that before how many times on stage at E3s in the past. But the great thing about it is just that when you're in conversations, for example, when you play Mass Effect, you play Dragon Age, a lot of similar games that have the party member system and you're going questing and stuff, or the morale system where characters will approve or disapprove. When you played games like that before, I don't know if any of you guys are like me, but a lot of times, regardless if I'm going to be, good or bad, I usually try to exhaust every conversation option before I pick the one that seems like it's going to take me to the next tier. Like it's going to carry the conversation forward. Mm-hmm. This game doesn't exactly do that. And I kind of learned that right away. So it really forces a lot of role play because sometimes I'm choosing things, I'm asking questions. Well, then the conversation just ends. Some things you ask or some things
it's not
you
like
talk
Bethesda
about,
games.
No, the conversation
is like here, exhaust the bottom 4 options, and then one of the top 2 will.
Yeah, it's almost like certain questions are more like side quest options, and then you have a question or a comment that's more of a main quest that advances it forward. And sometimes it's just all of them are going to do that, and you only really pick one, but they don't tell you that. But that makes it really fun because I'm really forced to get in the headspace of my character, and I have to think, well, I don't know which one of these is going to continue it forward. I'm not metagaming in that sense now. So I'm thinking, what Starkiss, what would he actually say here in case I don't get another chance to ask this or say this? That's really cool. I really, really like that. And also just, so for you guys that have played D&D, for those of you that haven't, when you are, this is so cool. When you are playing the game, a narrator is commenting on everything you do.
I do love that.
You may be going up to a pod, like a pool of let's say water, and you're just going up to investigate. And something like Dragon Age Origins, you'd see text pop up and it kind of describes what's happening. A narrator in this game is actually commenting on what you do. Suddenly a couple options pop up. What do you want to do with this pool? And then you might see lean in to investigate. You might get the option to walk away, something like that. Well, suddenly I hit the option to investigate and dice pops up, a D20 pops up, just like a tabletop, and you roll it. And based off your stat modifiers and everything, you might get some bonuses. You may get some in the opposite. Yeah, but you get to roll that, and it'll tell you the difficulty check. And in Dungeons and Dragons, what that means is to pass the check, you have to hit this base number or higher, but you can't go any lower. If you hit any lower than this number, say it's a 10, 9 or lower, it's a fail. If you at least hit 10, then you pass. You succeed on the roll. So let's say I hit 11, I succeed. The narrator starts narrating again, telling me, like, as you lean in, a strange odor emits, seeping into your nostrils, blah, blah, and it really pushes the narrative forward, especially for your character that isn't voiced. Your character only really talks sort of out of combat, like when you're actually traveling around, they'll comment on some stuff, like when you're interacting, but that's really the only time they talk. But that's, I mean, to answer your question, that's really one of my favorite things about it is just the player agency, the freedom you're getting with that. And obviously with the quest, I mean, you do get some similarities to like something like Mass Effect or Dragon Age where you can just straight up kill a party member. My coworker, Steve, shout out to him. We have been talking about this game so much as he's playing through it. And he was telling me one of the characters he killed right away. So anything I've tried to talk to him about that character with, he's like, I haven't even experienced that. Yeah. So you have all those options if you want to kill characters, if you want to leave certain things behind.
That does seem like the standout trait for most people is the decision making and the choices. Because like you said, most AAA games, I mean, there are AAA games that do a really good job of it. I think BioWare and Bethesda do a good job of it, but at the end of the day, it usually comes down to, do you want to be angry at this person, or do you want to be happy with this person, or do you want to somewhere be in the middle? And it all usually comes down to just a couple different shades, where it seems like Baldur's Gate 3 is like, here's 176,000 different permutations that all come together and make
100%.
The final ending of this game,
The side quests in this game are next level. There is no... I can't tell sometimes, unless I'm looking at my mission log, what is actually a main quest and what's not. They're all... You guys remember when you're playing Mass Effect 1 or 2? Dragon Age Origins? Like, definitely not Inquisition or Andromeda, but when you talk to anybody and it just kind of has a more cinematic feel, characters are emoting.
Definitely
like
not
that.
Andromeda.
Yeah.
I agree, but I could feel the salt there.
Yeah, there's a tiny bit.
I agree. Yeah.
This is what I love. It makes everything feel like it matters, and it makes me feel like I don't want to skip any of it. When I would play something like Inquisition or Andromeda, as much as I enjoy those games for what they are, the camera just sort of zooming in on a static character standing still, giving me a fetch quest, was really disappointing and really bummed me out, because part of what's fun about these side quests, why do we do them? It's to build out the world more, to understand the lore more, to make the world feel lived in and feel like it matters and we're making a difference, whatever we do. But in this one, they actually have all that mocap. The mocap is insane. I've never seen it this good in an RPG game. I've showed Brian some clips on Discord, but characters are generally, they'll take one of their fingers, wriggle it around. If, they'll lean down. The camera will cut up close to their eyes as it narrows, gazing at you. All those type of things you want are there. It genuinely feels like you're watching a movie, but taking a part of it.
The mocap's impressive.
Yeah.
And I think that... Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to hear.
Well, I'm just going to say, I think that, like, I'm of the opinion that... I'm not trying to bring Starfield into this, but I'm of the opinion it doesn't matter to me, and I'm very happy with how it is. But, like, you can see how, like, your general kind of basic gamer out there who just kind of doesn't really nerd out online through forums and stuff. If you look at, like, a Starfield animation, and you look at, like, a Dragon Age animation, or you even look at... Or, I'm sorry, not Dragon Age. You look at that, I just call in Baldur's Gate Dragon Age, but they're very similar.
That Dragon Age Origins specifically. 100%.
But if you look at, like, you look at, like, a Last of Us or a God of War type mocap, or you look at Baldur's Gate 3 mocap, and of course Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield came out essentially at the same time, you can see how, like, someone who doesn't really know... Because, like, what we know as gamers that are listening here is different studios go for different things. I don't detract from Starfield at all for their facial animations, but, like, you can see how in 2023, two rival RPGs kind of coming out similar time, the mocap is so impressive in something like Baldur's Gate 3, whereas in Bethesda, they're kind of in that same... It's not mocap, it's like computer... It's like they self-animated themselves or automated through, and... So I think, like, even though we can say, well, this game wasn't going for that and this one was, things like the mocap in Baldur's Gate 3 are objectively standouts, right? Like, I actually looked up Baldur's Gate 3 early access gameplay years ago because I saw the cinematics, I saw the mocap and stuff, and I thought, this looks like a BioWare game. This looks like something I would really love. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. And then I looked at it, and I saw that it was the combat that it was, and I lost interest because it's not for me. Well, then, of course, a year or so later, Josh is, like, talking about Baldur's Gate 3 all the time, and, like, I can remember me briefly looking into it because I saw, like, the quality bar that was there. It was just, I was obviously just thrown off by the combat. But if I haven't iterated it before, I'll iterate it again. I have no issues with the combat objectively. It's just, like, my preferences. It's hard for me to get behind.
I understand.
And the thing is, like, even turn-based I've come around to a little bit more, but it seems that Baldur's Gate 3 is deeper and more tactical, which makes it even harder for me.
It's a barrier to entry in some ways. I made a few notes for that, but one thing that's actually really cool, that's really, really different, is the story is not solely focused on your character being the protagonist. Like, in a loose sense, yes, you're still the main character. There are going to be elements that just focus on your character at times. But for an example, guys, this is where some of the choice paralysis comes into. I was out adventuring with a couple people in my squad, and I come upon 2 characters that are arguing about someone they have suspended in a cage. And I'm like, oh, how do I want to approach this? Well, I switch over to this character named Asterion, who's a rogue that I have in my group. Really good at sneaking and everything. I'm sneaking up there, and you. What's cool too is just like in Dragon Age, you can kind of split the party up. So like if you just want to have one person kind of sneak ahead, the other stay back, you can do that. If you don't, if you want to have them all roll into together, you can. But I just have him sneak up, and when I get up there, I get close enough. I fail a sneak check. It goes into a conversation. But in other games, even though I'm playing as that character, it typically would revert to my character just sort of teleporting there and my character being in the conversation. It's not. They're talking to Asterion. When I get dialogue choices, it's Asterion who has to make those choices. And when if I'm gonna make something that's like a persuasion, type of dialogue choice,
his persuasion.
He has to roll, and it's based off his stats. And characters are gonna comment on him. So like his race, or my race being a drow. They're going to have those specific things, just like in Mass Effect, for example, when they would comment on some of your backgrounds and stuff like that. So, and I got interested when this moment happened because I thought, well, I'm going to save it, but I'm going to reload and I'm going to go back and I'm going to try it with my guy. So I went back, I took the whole party chugging up there. We were tooting up and down. We got up there and yeah, they're talking to me and I'm a drow and I was able to persuade them down. The conversation options were a little bit similar, but the fact that the focus was now on me, just really goes to show how much fun this is going to be.
And little things like that take way more effort, but it adds so much to the world.
It really does. And why this is cool too. And High Potion did a great job talking about the co-op aspect of this, particularly, I thought. So if you guys want to hear more about it, go listen to them for that one. The cool thing is too, is if you're playing this with friends, even though the first player is the first player, they're not necessarily the main character. You can have 4-player co-op with the whole squad of created characters that are not the, already pre-made characters that are going to be your companions. You can roll in with a squad of created characters. And let's say Brian's player number 1 and he goes up and talks to that person. I'll be able to listen into that conversation. I can't cooperatively participate in the same conversation. But what I can do is I can listen. I can lean in and listen. However, Brian could be off fighting somebody and I'm over talking to somebody in the same town, just a little bit over. So he might miss out on that. I might miss out on what he's doing. But in that way, you're all still getting to be the main characters because that's what D&D is supposed to be. There's never a focus on one person. It's the group adventure together that you get to celebrate. I saw a clip on Reddit recently where there's a character named Shadowheart. And the one player character is having this really heartfelt conversation with her and she's pouring her heart out. And there's a Dragonborn dude fucking shredding a guitar basically in the background. That's another player. And you just, it's the things you see that make the experience so
that
fun.
Stuff's incredible to me because that's the kind of stuff that as a gamer who plays games all the time and you see all the different variations of designs and RPGs, you get to thinking that it's not possible to have a game with 4-player co-op where people are talking to NPCs here while someone's fighting here and it all goes together, or having persuasion based on that particular character that went up to talk to them instead of you always think that thing's not possible because usually they don't do that in games.
Right.
And usually the only time I can ever remember you being able to talk to someone while I'm in combat is an MMO. And an MMO is it's nothing, no hate to MMOs, but it's a different type of thing. This is a hardcore single player CRPG that allows you to have that fighting here while someone's talking at the same time.
Yeah.
I feel like I've never seen that before. And up to 4 players that can do this stuff, to me, it's just kind of revolutionary in gaming.
Absolutely. And I think what makes that fun is, for example, if, a lot of the characters that are out there in the world, you can have conversations with. So again, choice paralysis comes in. Do I just want to attack this person? I'm perched on a ledge where I have advantage. If I shoot him with an arrow, I'm going to do, I'm going to roll with advantage for my damage. Or do I want to go in and talk and just see what the content is there? You can always sit there and co-op and say, Brian, why don't you go up high since you're you're a ranger? Sit up there. I'm going to go in and talk to this person since I'm a fighter. I'll get in close with them. We'll see what happens. And then if it goes into combat, you're still there in that position, and especially on something like split screen, you can just watch what the other person's doing. Of course, online, that's different, but very, very cool. And really helps make the combat a lot of fun. I had a moment again where I was walking up with my group. There were these 2 dudes talking about how they found, I think, a shipwreck or something. And, it was their score and they were all excited. And I was like, hey guys, I'm Starkiss. And right away they were like, well, what the fuck are you doing here? Go away. This is our place. This is our territory. And I tried to persuade them out of it, and it went right into combat. And they had some buddies kind of around with them in this sort of chapel area. And I thought, fuck. So I reloaded. I was like, I want to see what happens when I just waltz in there alone. But before I do that, I'm going to split off my party and I'm going to try to get them in some advantageous positions. So if I fail this roll again and we go into combat, I'm at least set up pretty good,
Yeah.
And again, it makes that role playing chance awesome because usually when you're playing tabletop, you're saying, the DM will say, about 30 feet away, you hear, 3 distinct voices talking to one another. Sounds like they're arguing. What do you want to do? And the players will sit there and discuss amongst themselves, like, I want to sneak or I want to do this or whatever. It kind of creates a scenario in co-op where it's like, well, what do we want to do? Do we want to go up and talk to him, or I'll go up and talk to him, or this other player is like, I just shoot my arrow. Sorry, guys, combat. It really makes it cool.
I've heard actual which you are one as well yourself. I've heard other actual D&D players say this is the only video game they've ever played that actually takes that D&D experience and puts it to video game form.
It feels legit. They change some things, but it's very minute. But in that thing, I had the persuasion check roll well. I told them, like, hey, guys, this is bad juju. You guys don't want any of this stuff. Go away. And they're like, oh, shit, you're right. Let's go. Let's get out of here. They left. Well, then there's a door. And I went down to the door, and I heard a voice on the other side. And I said, hey, just so you know, your friends all abandoned you. And the voice on the other side of the door said to me, well, hey, I got some friends inside. Come on in. And then we had a big schmodown. We threw down and had a big battle. It was just really cool because that could have gone so differently.
Sounds awesome.
Another thing that was awesome. I'm going up to this one area outside of a town, and there's a little campfire. There's some like roast mutton or something right there being cooked. In it is a dagger. This narrator's telling me, it looks really interesting, looks very cool. And you get the option, you want to lean in and inspect it a little bit closer. Seems like it'd be pretty hard to pull out. That's what she said. But then I'm like, well, and I'm only up there as my character Starkiss. I'm like, well, I'm going to try to use a strength check to try to pull it out. As I try to pull it out, it snaps and breaks. I could have got a really good weapon, and now I lost my opportunity to. Now, I could have reloaded, and I could have took another character who maybe had higher strength, my fighter named Lizelle, and I could have used her to go up there to try to pull it herself using her strength that's very, very high. But again, the fact that like I'm locked out of that, and it's just a minute moment, plays no consequence on the overall plot, is amazing. And what's also cool about that is something else that was around that area. I'm in this area, and I hear at this barn, there's this big booming going on. I'm like, what is going on? Are some people like dancing in there? What's going on? I go and knock, and they're like, go away or something like that. I open the door, and let's just say it's 2 races smashing, clapping cheeks. And they're mad at me. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Keep on with the lovemaking. I'm going to go. And we went into combat, and they try to attack me. Well, then there are certain things you can do in the game. There's an option called Speak with the Dead. You can never do this. Like, you don't have to do this. It's just an option in the game. But if you want to get more info on an area, like that area, I kill those characters, and then I cast this spell called Speak with the Dead. It raises this character from the dead, and I was able to ask them 5 questions. What are you doing here? What's going on? Do you have any gold? What do you have on you? You can ask those sort of questions, and also you can get clued in to a quest you're on, get more information. It's an extra way to achieve more opportunity for things. And another great example of this is there's a spell called Animal Speaking. The game is littered with animals, and you can go up and talk to them. Now I can go up and talk to a dog, and the dog's just going to bark at me, and I can choose to pet it if I want. I can try to get insight into like its body language and see what's wrong or what's going on good with it. But if I have the Animal Speaking, it will talk to me like a human, and a whole different conversation happens. It will speak English to me, and I'll be able to gain way more insight. Completely changes how you play. I mean, it's just so different in that sense. Because
the attention to detail seems on another level in that game. I actually read someone wrote an article about using that dead speak on a quest before, where they had done a quest where like some guy asked them to go like investigate a house, and they went and investigated the house, and there was someone dead in there, and then they came back out and finished the quest, and then they were like, wait a minute, I wonder what would happen if I reloaded this and used dead speak on the corpse inside, and it just changed the whole quest.
Yep.
Because once they learned what the person said, I'm like, that shit's amazing.
And the reason why that causes choice paralysis is because there's no real right way to sort of do anything. It's like if you just want to be that goody two-shoes, which my character kind of is, and you just want to have all the right decisions and all of it go well, it's just not always going to go that way because it's all up to the rolls. So you're kind of letting fate rest on the dice roll and some of your modifiers that can help or hinder that.
It's kind of like real life. I mean, even if you try to be a good person in real life, sometimes you say something to someone, it pisses them off, and you're like, wow, I did not want that reaction from you. But, you know, like if you tell someone that they're, you know, that they're, I don't know, their shoes have Velcro on them. What the hell am I saying? I don't know. Like I went to like I've said something like I remember like I'll tell someone like oh you're 50? You look like you're I didn't even know if you were 40. I mean I know your hair's gray, but you know you look younger. And then they're like upset that I said their hair was gray, and I'm like, well,
I wish I could reload.
I wish I could reload because I thought the fact that I said that you looked younger would have made you happy, but the fact that I drew attention to your gray hair made you feel bad. And now it's like in a video game. It's always like in a video game where you're like, you know, the dialogue option's like, I don't feel like doing that, so you click it.
Yeah.
And then Shepard's like, I'm not doing that, you piece of shit. And you're like, what? No, I didn't. No,
right.
I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
What?
The game has a pretty good autosave, but you're still going to want to save frequently because of that type of stuff. You know, if you're someone that's going to obsess over that, like, oh shit, I really messed up bad, or I didn't gain that really consequential piece of information that I really needed from this person, you know, then you're going to want to reload that stuff and go back, and you're going to do it numerous times. Talking about the combat, what's cool about this and regarding D&D, it's something that I think is to the benefit of this game, is although it uses the D&D 5e rule set, the only time that's really going to be something that's in your face is when the dice roll pops up. So, for example, like in tabletop, the Dungeon Master calls for initiative, and you all roll your dice. Whoever gets the highest number, you know, goes first in the turn order. In combat, it just does that for you. A lot of this stuff is happening in the background. When you're choosing to attack somebody, you make the choice, but then the dice, you know, roll happens, and you're not seeing it. It's just more of an invisible thing going on in the background. It's really nice. So people that don't really like math, like I don't, you're not going to have to worry about a lot of that stuff. Rewards you for being smart, which is something I really appreciate. You said something the other day, Brian, about, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, you said it really well too, but when you play real-time combat and stuff like that, it's sort of like going outside and playing recess. You know, it just feels really rewarding. And then when you play turn-based, it's almost like you're in like math class or something, and you're taking a quiz, and you feel a different sense of success from it.
Yeah,
right.
It's like because like when I'm doing just like action combat, I'm kind of just going out there, mashing the buttons, seeing the flashy moves, feeling really good about it, having a great time, kind of like recess. But when I'm playing a turn-based or a tactical game, it's like, okay, there's multiple ways to approach this. I can take my time, figure out what the best move is, and then if you do the best move, it feels like you're taking like a math test and you're just acing all of the diagrams, all of the fractions, everything just kind of like, oh, this fits, this fits, this fits. It's like, oh wait, if my rogue went here and got behind this guy, and then I had my archer elevated here, and then I had the bard who's good at persuasion talk this guy out of doing this thing, and then I'll give room for this guy to come in, and then when it all comes and works together, it feels really good. It's like actually the most recent thing I can think of for myself was playing Final Fantasy 12, the Zodiac Age, because it has this thing called the Gambit system, which I told Josh about. It's very similar to Dragon Age Origins, where you get to select auto select what your character will do if this thing happens. So it's like I want Balthier to attack this guy if his health falls below 25%. But I don't want him to heal anybody. And you have all these, you get to set up all these what ifs things that'll happen. And then you take, so like when I was playing Final Fantasy 12, I take my party in, I die because this guy was poisoning me and this person was blocking my spell or whatever. So I die. Well, then I restart or reload. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to make sure that anytime poison is casted, this person puts an antidote, knocks that out. And if anybody tries to debuff me, this character will block the debuff. And then I also know that character is weak to fire, so I'll have this character specifically use fire on the weak. And then when you go in, it's just like this well-oiled machine. It's like boom, 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 and it's like you solve the math problem. And it's like the endorphins. I guess that's the thing is like when I'm playing like Final Fantasy 16, which is like action based, it's like X circle, right trigger, and it's just like little endorphin, little endorphin, little endorphin, little endorphin. When I play like a turn based or an RPG or turn based or a tactical, it's kind of like I go in, there's no endorphins. I kind of pick what I want, no endorphins. But then once I execute, if you execute properly, it's like one giant endorphin, and you're just like, that felt good. That felt real good. I like that. I'd like to do it again. So
for sure. I had a moment when I was playing it where it was early on. It was me and one other character, and she was more of an up close type person, and I'm more of a bard, so I'm staying back. I can use a bow and arrow. I can use a sword if I need to, but I'm more staying back. And I was stealthing on these little like creatures. They're like brains with little arms and legs. Very creepy and gross.
I watched gameplay. That part looked awesome. With pulling out of the skull. Oh, that looks so cool.
So
that's the beginning of the game, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that part was, but this part I'm talking about was in this combat scenario. She's up close to these little things. I had snuck up. I had taken a couple others out, and I thought, this is going to be easy. Well, they start putting a beat down on her, and she's really low on health. And this is early in the game. The game can be punishing if you let it be. Well, I'm like, oh shit, what do I want to do? So I'm sitting there flipping through my options, and I'm thinking, what can I do? Like, I could shoot one with an arrow. I could take it out, but then the other one was still there, and that other one's going to get a chance to attack her and maybe take her out. Then I realized I got a spell called Sleep, and I can target up to 3 creatures under a certain limit of health points. And I'm like, I could knock them out. Like, I could basically put them to sleep, and then they would get no turns for like 10 turns in the combat. I did that. It succeeded. They went to sleep. Whack, whack. They're dead. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah. And then I had another time. This was the most amazing point for me in the game so far. I'm down in this dank, dark cavern. And I'm going to skip all the plot details, but I come upon this big mama matriarch spider. This thing is massive, like 150 health points. And I'm like, oh shit, I want to take this thing out. I saved my game before just in case. And I'm thinking it gets to a point, I've slayed some other spiders, some lesser spiders in that area. And I'm like, oh, we got this. All 4 of us, it's only going to get 1 turn. Yeah, maybe it'll do some damage, but all 4 of us, no problem. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Suddenly, this big spider is like, oh, you want to fuck on me? You want to fuck on me? It goes and it wakes up all these little hatchlings out of their egg sacs. And they start dashing over. And I'm like, oh, what did I just get myself into? I'm going to play this out. We're getting beaten and battered, but we're also giving it back to them. And at the same time, I'm kind of chipping away at this big mama matriarch. And it gets to a point where I've killed all the hatchling. It's just down to her, but she's got like 70-something points of health left. And around this cavernous area are these little bridges, these makeshift bridges made out of webbing. And she runs off in the distance and crawls over onto one to sort of like prepare to shoot what I'm assuming is like acid or something at me in her turn. And it's up to Starkiss's turn. And I'm like, what can I do? I have a lot of stuff in my inventory. What can I do that's going to like make an impact and potentially debuff her? Like, I can't do a lot of damage as my character with like a bow and arrow, but what could I do that would like debuff her so the next person isn't going to get super screwed? And then I realized I bought a long time ago, I bought this thing called Arrow of Roaring Thunder. It says it causes knockback. I'm like, oh, fuck. Let's see what this does. I shoot it. It does 12 points of damage, the arrow just hitting the spider, but proceeds to knock her off that bridge, sails her falling down, causing 49 points of damage. Total 61 points of damage.
Amazing.
And I'm like, she's down to 12 points of health at this point. And I was like, that's why you don't fuck with me. That's why I'm the best. I'm like, go. And I was like, I was getting out of my chair just hyped, and I felt so rewarded for that. She climbed up, we finished her off, but it was just such a great moment. And I thought, that's really, really cool. Another thing
it was thinking that got you there, though.
Yeah.
It was the thought.
So much of it felt clumsy in that battle because I had everyone so huddled together, I couldn't really get separated. And I was scared too, because if a character goes down, if you leave them down for like 3 combat rounds and they fail what these like rolls that are happening in the background, they're dead. And you can go eventually in the game and you can get them like you can bring them back to life, but that can be a process. So another thing you can do is you can go up and just press a button to revive them. Like they're not screaming out, revive me, like Cole, but you can go up and pick them up. They'll get like 1 health point, and then they're back in the game. So I try to keep everyone together, but we were getting attacked so bad too. So that moment was just a ooh rah kind of good feel good moment for me. But another thing that's cool about this with the agency is, for example, certain things in your inventory you can do. If you think you can do it in this game, you can probably do it. A good example being my friend Steve at work. He had like I think he said a dead rat in his inventory. And he was like, oh, I got a dead rat in here. What the hell? And he was playing co-op. He threw it at one of his buddies. Now, for example, things you would normally pick up, you think, oh, this is just junk that I'm going to sell, like candles. Let's say one of my other characters, let's say I'm playing in co-op and Brian's got a flask of oil. He throws that on the ground. Gets to my turn, I got a candle. If I throw that at that, it's going to light it on fire.
Massive fire damage.
Yeah. A person in their inventory had a ton of, they were standing over one of these like the flat, like a oil pit basically. And they were just going through the inventory. You know, they were over encumbered. They're sifting through stuff. They drop a bunch of candles they had. They go out of the menu. Big explosion. Pretty freaking cool. Also, like, you know, you can throw health potions. So, like, if Brian's character in co-op is down and I can't reach him, like my movement, I'm too far away to actually go up and pick him up, I can take one of my health potions and I can chuck it at him and he's going to come back to life.
As long as there's not a dice roll for me catching it, because if it's like real
No, there's not. No, there's not. But another thing, too, that was really cool, Steve mentioned was, I think there was a part in one of his dialogue choices where he got an option that was basically stating that he had learned this information in a book he had previously read. So if you hadn't read it, you didn't get that option. There are books in there that you can read similar to Skyrim, not quite to the level of detail, but you'll still see a lot of books that you can gain information on, help build out the world, and help give you some answers, do some environmental storytelling that's really, really fun. That part I really, really loved. But the combat is just super fun. It does take time. It's got a little bit of a barrier to entry because you're having a lot of different spells and abilities, and taking time to learn those can be a bit tough if you've not played D&D before and trying to grasp that. But for you guys that are like Brian and you really want to play this game, but you're also not as interested in that, they got you covered. They got 3 difficulties, and one of them is just a much easier mode that's focused on storytelling. And to my understanding, characters are much harder. Your party is much harder to be killed. Your armor class goes up, which means basically like if an enemy's trying to shoot you, they have to basically roll an invisible dice. And if it doesn't hit that number, then their attack just misses. They have to at least hit that, and then they're rolling another dice invisibly.
Yeah, I'd like to hear this because I actually read online that the Explorer mode was not much easier than Balanced.
It's still going to be tough. The game still has a lot of boss fights in there that are designed to be punishing, but you're still going to it's harder to kill. Your AC class is higher. Enemies are just easier to hit and stuff like that. So a lot of the percentages
I heard that they don't think as smartly either. Like, right. They're less likely to do something to screw you over.
They definitely don't play as smart. And it's not like a case of XCOM, thankfully, where like I think Steve might have mentioned this in High Potion, but in XCOM it would say you have like a 99% chance to hit and then you miss, and it's like that's XCOM, baby, that's how it goes. But this game is a little bit more complimentary to you with that type of stuff. The music, some of the best music I've ever heard. When you go into character creation, you hear this voice say, "Who are you?" And this beautiful, tranquil music kicks in as you're going through the character creation, selecting your race, getting a better idea of what kind of character you want to be. It's beautiful. There's also a lot of great ambiance. I've listened to this with headphones on and off, and it's just beautiful. I'm only in Act 1. I've played about 30 hours, and sometimes I'm just sitting there. I literally will get up, stand, and just think about in turn-based combat, like, what do I want to do? I'll get up and I'll go let Chewie outside for a little potty break. I'll think about what I want to do. I come back, or I'm sifting in my inventory and I'm hearing the ambient music in the background or just the nature sounds. It's beautiful. It's very relaxing, very peaceful game. Not high stress despite the turn-based combat. But going into the cons before I close out with my final thoughts, there's just 2 things. And one I already mentioned. The combat can just be a tough barrier to entry for people that are not as initiated. For those not initiated, but I am initiated. It's not too hard, but at the same time, there's a little bit of a learning curve, and I could see where that can put people off. Like for you, Brian, for example, I could see that being a bit frustrating. Not because to your respect, I know you're going to play it, you're going to give it all a try and everything. But some of it, you might not necessarily want to have to think about like, oh, I can throw the candle here. Or, oh, I should equip my blade with poison before going into this battle, all that type of stuff. But it's still at the same time, there's tutorial stuff that'll help teach you. And there's a lot of stuff you can avoid if you want to. You can talk your way out of a lot of stuff if your roles are successful enough. And that's just the fun and the agency they give you and the options. So like there was a whole town of goblins, and everything I've read, everything I've seen, people more often than not just slay those goblins. I talked him down. I was like, hey, my bard, let me sing you a jaunty little tune about your group. And he's like, oh, yeah? And I was like, hey, oh. And I was successful.
Wish the Goblin King could sing like in The Hobbit, like, down, down, down in Goblin Town.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were like, that's pretty good. I like that shit. When's that coming out on Spotify? So I got to go through the town, and I got to do what I wanted, basically. And they were just bitching to each other throughout the whole time while I was there. And I was like, do it. I'm going to go back and I'm going to fight them all because they're goblins. For my character, I'm like, you know what? He doesn't approve of this. But you know what? For now, I got to go roam around and do what I wanted. And that's fun. But yeah, another thing that's the con is just the inventory management. And I think it is a good con. Like, and I say good as in this, like, it's a problem. I've heard for Larian, this is never really a good thing, but it's very cool, kind of like Fallout, kind of like a lot of games where you're able to loot a lot of stuff as you explore. You're going to get over encumbered pretty fast. You can sell all of it, which I would recommend, and like loot everything, sell everything. You want to get that gold. You want to be buying a lot of stuff with vendors. There's a lot of great options in there of what you can get, but it is so tough to sift through. You do have options like, oh, I want to sort this by the newest items I've gotten, or the oldest, or gear only equipment items, stuff like that. But it's just so tedious and very time consuming, especially when you're getting over encumbered. And like for my character, I'm spending a lot of time sometimes making a note. You can make a little note of like, oh, I want to add this to my wares so I can remind myself to sell this to a vendor later. Like, this is a vendor item. This is something I want to keep. You can send stuff to your camp. That's another thing too, Brian. You'll get the option to like have a full rest, what they call a long rest. And you go to your camp. You have a camp that's kind of out there. And
reminds me of Dragon Age Origins.
Yes, it's just like that. So when you go to your camp, if you have enough food, you have to have enough food, which you can get pretty easily as long as you're looting. You can take a long rest. But that is how you get a lot of companion dialogue, interesting conversations, romance stuff advancing, a lot of backgrounds for characters. So you're going to want to go and have those long rests, and you can take them as many times as you like, as long as you have enough food, So that's another option to advance the story forward, talking to your characters. But the inventory management aspect does take time away from actual gameplay and playing, because I'm constantly having to sift through what I want to sell, what I can offload to another person if I'm over encumbered, what I want to equip, what I want to have, what I want what person to have.
It's a hard one for games to get right. I'm sure there is a game that's really good at inventory management, but I can't think of one.
Like, I can't really necessarily give this game a certain score. Like, fun factor, it's a 10 out of 10. It's 11 out of 10 for me. It's that good. And the inventory stuff I've gotten used to, and I like it because it's anal, and I love anal, so I'm fine with it. But at the same time, for a lot of people, it's going to be frustrating and just annoying at the same time. But
my final question to you was going to be, if it makes no sense because you haven't played even half the game, but like if you had to give the game a score right now, what would you?
It's 11 out of 10. I mean, the concept of the story
11 out of 10. Yeah, you heard
it. The story is, you get a parasite put in you, and within a certain amount of time, you're going to turn into this other being. But the game is not actually putting that timetable on you, and you have to deal with that. It's just a background motivation for your characters and your group.
The mind flayer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so the whole group is going through that. They're all in that same situation. You're sort of all coming together by chance because you're all experiencing this at the same time. And there's 3 acts. Like I said, I am 30 hours in, and I feel like I barely scratched the surface of Act 1. But so much of it is story content. There's a lot of me just exploring on the roads, and I come by chance of characters. There's a lot. Part of the main quest in Act 1 is you chasing down a lot of leads, and as far as I've understood, like, you can explore each one of those in the main quest sense without sort of one of those canceling the other out. Very cool in that way, and just really, really fun. I think the fact, like I said, like with Witcher setting sort of a precedent for like side quests moving forward. I don't, I think this game will be a landmark in that sense of not just it's like being another game that does the side quest just as well on the same level of main quest. Like if you're going to play the game, don't skip those. Like if you get a chance to talk to somebody or interact, do it because that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
There's no lesser quality being given, but at the same time, I don't think this is necessarily going to be the kind of game where you see all these other the people in the industry going, oh shit, we got to reassemble. We got to, reform and analyze how we're going to attempt our game now. I think it's another lightning in the bottle moment, but that's all the more reason why Witcher 3 has the legacy it does. And I think that's all the more reason why this will have the legacy it does is because of that. It's a beautiful game, remarkable score to accompany you traveling with your players. The companions are very likable. They all have a different sense of personality to them with backstories that you get to explore, just like in other RPGs. The combat is richly rewarding when you're able to take the time and you can enjoy it. It'll make you feel smart. Other times it'll make you feel dumb. And if you get too frustrated, you can just reload, and if not, you push on through. It's just a really fun game, and it really rewards me for thinking outside the box in a way that other games haven't. And I
like what you said about it being a lightning in a bottle experience, because I think what a lightning in the bottle experience does is it raises the quality bar, but I don't think it really asks anyone else to meet it. I think it just asks them to get close to it. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
And it doesn't have to be the same thing. I think most people, I know Wesley would not be one of them, but I think most people, if you ask them what they wanted out of Mass Effect 4, if what you got was essentially Mass Effect 2 again, like that quality, that type of game, I think that'd probably pretty much satisfy Mass Effect fans as a whole. I say maybe not Wesley.
Wesley,
his least favorite of the three.
Oh,
but like, yeah,
he'll love this game.
Yeah, but if Mass Effect, the new Mass Effect, if it can just deliver on kind of, the high points of that series, which were, most people would say 2, there's elements of 1 and 3, I think that would be satisfying. Then the next Mass Effect, the next Elder Scrolls, it doesn't have to be this thing where you can drop a candle on oil and it blows up. It doesn't have to do what Baldur's Gate 3 does. It doesn't have to try to imitate. I mean, I think all good game developers, look at inspiration from the best of their contemporaries. But no, I think it raises the quality bar, and it just says, hey, this is where it's at right now. You have in 2011, the quality bar for RPGs, you had like your Skyrim, and 2015 you had your Witcher 3, and you have Baldur's Gate 3 now, and it just says, hey, this is kind of where it's at, and you don't have to meet it, but like, why don't you try to get a little closer?
100%. 100%. I can see where some of that stuff is another example of being a tough barrier to entry. Some of it could seem daunting and overwhelming. Like, well, I'm not going to think about that. I don't want to think about that. I want to turn my mind off and just blow through a game. This isn't that kind of game. But if you're someone who really loves rich storytelling, an impactful world that has a lot of world building in of itself, it's great. You don't need to be a D&D fan to be thrust into this. Part of the best thing about this is the fact that it's so similar to Mass Effect in the vein that, like, the world has already been there living, and you're picking up on it. You're like, oh, what's this race? Oh, it's a Turian. Oh, you guys are all in the Citadel together. Oh, the first race here was the Asari. You're picking up stuff like that as you're going through the game, and it's very rewarding in that way because it's not necessarily holding your hand, but at the same time, it's not expecting you to have to come with all this baggage of understanding. And for those that get into it, for those that like it, this game actually serves as a sort of sequel in a way to an actual D&D tabletop campaign module called Descent into Avernus. They reference a lot of the events in that. This is another case, though, of like, you don't need to understand that. I've listened to a little bit of a story about that, but like for the first like 20 hours of the game, I had no idea about that. So all this stuff that they were talking about that was referencing that, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, this is something that just happened beforehand. World's not waiting for you to arrive, but when you get there, you can make an impact, and that's what's awesome. And like I said, in terms of the tabletop stuff, it's really only the dice rolls that really spell out like tabletop. The rest of the stuff is more in the background, and you don't have to think about that. Even when you make a character creation, Brian, it'll already give you by default recommended. Like if you don't want to think like, I need to put a lot of points in strength or intelligence or constitution, it'll just come recommended with the class. And if you want to change that, you can, but recommended is the best way to go. So it's a very amazing game. I can't wait to play it again. I was literally playing it before Brian and I got recording. I'm almost grumpy at times because I just can't wait to get back to it, and I don't want to go to work. Stephen Hawes said it, but like you just want to clone yourself so you can just go play these games that are coming out. We're eating so good right now. That's how I feel about
Starfield.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, man, when I'm not playing it, I'm thinking about it, and I can't wait to make my next build, even though I'm probably not going to play it for a while because of all these other good games. But it's already making me think about that. Whereas most games I play, I'm like, when this is done, I'm moving on to this. There's a part of me that's like, I don't want to move on. I just want to live here forever. I can't wait to play it again. I think
Baldur's Gate 3 is that generational game we've been talking about.
Yeah, I think it is. It has the benefit of being sort of, even though it's the third in the franchise, it's sort of a new IP in a way that's unfamiliar.
Just like Witcher 3.
You know, yeah, exactly like that. Because like something like the next Mass Effect, it's like that comes with the expectation of like, please be better than Andromeda, but at least be on the same level of the original trilogy and to some different degrees. Same thing with the next Dragon Age, for example, or KOTOR remake or something. There's a base level of expectation. This kind of came out and it was just like, well, it's a new Baldur's Gate. Wow, we haven't got one of those in a while. Please be good. And it was, but they reference events from the first two, but the gap between 2 and 3 is like, I think over 100 years apart. So you're not really needing to play those. Amazing, amazing game, you guys. And I know a lot of you guys are waiting for the Xbox release, but I recommend trying it. And for people like Tony that want to play it with your wife and stuff, you're going to have a blast, buddy, because it really does take that tabletop experience and put it into a video game. It is the closest thing I've ever had, and it feels so identical. Love it.
Sweet. Yeah, you guys, you heard it here first. 11 out of 10 from Josh if you had to judge it right now.
Just being subjective, though. It's just informative. Like, of course I'm going to say that. Of course I'm going to eat its ass. But, it's got a couple cons in there, but they're very minute.
Yeah, the game sounds amazing, and honestly, like, I'm looking forward to trying it on the Xbox when it comes out. And this is just one of those games where, like I said, it's so big that it grabs even people like me who just would never be interested in the type of combat. But I love the characters and the dialogue in these types of games, and that's what I'm looking forward to experiencing. But
one last thing,
we're eating good.
I was just going to say, and you might be able to feel the same way with Starfield, I don't know, but my mental health has been so much better because of this game. I don't know if it's just because of the gaming season. There's so much. There's Starfield and Baldur's Gate. Then we got Spider-Man, 2 Mario game, all this other stuff coming out. But this game, when I'm playing it, it just makes me happier. And that's when I played KOTOR for the first time. It was the first game I ever played that let you make choices that had an impact on people. Like you could hurt them or help them and all that. And it affected young me at the time. It affected me and made me realize that, like, oh, when I talk to people, I need to be more considerate of how I come across and all that. And that was really cool for me. This doesn't quite hit that because it's not, I've already had that first experience there, and you always remember your first, but like, it's giving me that sense of like, I'm just really happy because I'm making an impact like you would in like BioWare games, but also all the agency makes me feel like it really makes these characters at the time feel like real people because of the motion capture, the way they're interacting and looking at you on top of your choices.
It's definitely been a feel good time because the fall weather's starting to hit and it's that gaming season and like
love it. Football's back.
Playing a Bethesda game again, like it takes me back to like, oddly enough, and I'm not trying to hate because I actually think Fallout 4 is a good game, but I'm not trying to hate on it. But it takes me back to 2011 when Skyrim came out and me and Josh and Creighton were in line at the midnight launch for that because I'm just like, oh, it's we're playing another Bethesda game again finally. And like, I mean, I had that with Fallout 4, of course, but I don't reflect on that as much as this. So, and I've already played so many good games, and I still got more coming up, and it's a great time. It's a great time. Yeah, I think Baldur's Gate 3, unless something really shocks us, though, I think it's a lock for either Game of the Year or it's definitely going to be. It's going to be like the number 1 or 2 nominee, and I think it'll probably win. But like, I think Baldur's Gate 3. If this year's a mountain of gaming, like a diagram, or how do you want to put like a graph, like we were going up, and I think Baldur's Gate 3 was the peak. Yeah. And I think we're just slowly maybe descending down. Like that makes it sound bad. I don't mean that. No. But I just mean like Baldur's Gate 3 is probably that peak experience.
Spider-Man 2 previews. I mean, the impressions are something.
They look
really
great.
Good. Yeah. 2 Mario games, Avatar for me, Assassin's Creed Mirage for a lot of people, Alan Wake 2. Yeah. Gosh, we got so much still coming.
Good shit.
It's only getting started, but yeah, great game. I love it, man. Makes me happy.
But all right, guys, that's the first parts of the review in progress for Baldur's Gate 3. If I had to guess, because I know Starfield, we're only going to have one more review in progress, and that'll sum that up because it's all we need for Starfield. I'm guessing Baldur's Gate 3, with how long Josh plays games, this could be 3, 4, 5. This could be a 6-part series over the course of a year.
Is it's just down to a case of just I need enough time to get into it, and I'm busy. I've been very
Yeah.
busy, but
When
I'm
you get enough time logged in to do a part 2, you
like
let me know.
I can easily see a scenario where Spider-Man 2 comes out and I really just don't play it because I'm still in the thick of Baldur's Gate. And normally I will still play the new hotness for a bit, and then I'm suddenly like jumping between two games.
Once the new hotness FOMO wears off, it don't matter. You just go back to playing mode.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
All right, guys.
good.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Sacred Icon Podcast. And as always, keep it sacred.